The initial hype. When Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl was first announced, fans of platform fighters were ecstatic. The idea of battling with iconic Nickelodeon characters like SpongeBob, Patrick, Aang, and Leonardo seemed like the perfect recipe for a nostalgic hit. The game's marketing capitalized on this nostalgia, aiming to appeal to older fans who grew up with these beloved shows. Visually, it adopted a vibrant, colorful aesthetic reminiscent of Super Smash Bros., but with a distinct Nickelodeon flair. Many believed this could be the challenger to Nintendo's Super Smash Bros., a series that has dominated the platform fighter genre for decades. It presented the promise of a platform fighter that wasn't just another clone, but a unique experience with its own personality. The excitement around the game was palpable, and it seemed poised to draw in a massive fanbase, if executed well. The disappointment of the first game, however, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl did not live up to its lofty expectations. At launch, the game felt incomplete. The absence of voice acting, particularly jarring in a game filled with animated characters, was one of the most glaring issues. Fans were confused, especially considering that voice acting is a standard feature in most major fighting games. The roster, while diverse, lacked the depth that many fans had hoped for, and the game offered little in terms of customization or extra content. The gameplay itself was serviceable, but lacked the polish and depth that fans had hoped for. While it was competent, it never reached the level of finesse that Super Smash Bros. Had perfected. Many players found that the game felt like it was trying to imitate Smash Bros. Without offering anything fresh or unique. The core mechanics, while fun, lacked the spark needed to set the game apart and make it a standout title. The improvement with the sequel. When Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 was announced, there was hope that the issues of the first game would be addressed. The addition of voice acting was seen as a major improvement, and the sequel was marketed as a refinement of the first. More characters were introduced, and gameplay balance was adjusted. But despite these improvements, the sequel did not capture the hearts of players. The core issues remained. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2 still couldn't compete with the polished mechanics and innovative features of Super Smash Bros. While some of the changes were welcome, they didn't feel substantial enough to elevate the game to the level of its competition. The sequel felt like a quick fix rather than a complete reimagining, and the damage caused by the first game's disappointing release remained evident. The collapse of the development team, studio shifts and layoffs. A major factor contributing to the series' downfall was the instability of the development studio. After the release of the first game, the studio faced severe financial troubles, which led to layoffs and restructuring. Many key developers and designers who contributed to the creation of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl were let go. This loss of talent had a huge impact on the future of the series. A platform fighter requires a talented and cohesive team, especially when the vision is as ambitious as creating a competitive alternative to Super Smash Bros. The departure of key team members meant that the vision for the game was lost, and the games that followed lacked the same level of care and creativity that was present in the original concept. How talent loss affected the games. Without the original developers, the games became a shadow of what they could have been. The lack of direction and creativity in the development process resulted in uninspired sequels. With the franchise in disarray and the talent gone, it became clear that the series was unlikely to return in a meaningful way. Any further installments would likely suffer from rushed development and lackluster innovation. The financial realities, why the franchise was doomed. The high cost of licensing and development. One of the biggest challenges the Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl series faced was the cost of licensing the characters. Popular Nickelodeon characters came with hefty licensing fees, and every new addition to the roster required a significant financial investment. This added to the already high development costs of creating a competitive platform fighter. Despite the game's initial excitement, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl did not generate the sales needed to cover these costs. The franchise's poor performance financially meant that the investment required to create a third installment would likely never be justified. For a game that had already failed to meet expectations twice, it was highly unlikely that any publisher would be willing to take another financial gamble on the series. Disappointing sales and ROI. Sales numbers are crucial in the gaming industry, and Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl simply didn't deliver. The initial buzz around the game quickly faded after its release, and the sales figures didn't live up to the hype. While the sequel attempted to address some of the original game's shortcomings, it still failed to generate the kind of sales needed to sustain the franchise. Even if a third game were to be developed, it would face the same financial hurdles. With the franchise's lack of success and a fractured fanbase, the likelihood of a third installment making a significant return on investment was slim. The business side of things was simple. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl had not proven itself to be a viable long-term franchise. The lost opportunity to build a loyal fanbase. A key factor in any successful game is its fanbase. Super Smash Bros., for example, has a dedicated and loyal community that continues to support the series through every new iteration. Unfortunately, the Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl series never built that kind of support. After the first game launched with numerous flaws, it lost a significant portion of its initial fanbase. The sequel did little to rebuild that trust, as many fans had already moved on to other fighting games. The franchise failed to cultivate the kind of loyal community needed for long-term success. For a third game to succeed, it would need to overcome the skepticism of a disillusioned fanbase, but that seemed unlikely given the series' history. The community, a divided fanbase that's moved on, fragmented community and lost trust. The Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl fanbase was deeply divided. While many players initially rallied behind the concept, they were quickly let down by the execution of the first game. The absence of voice acting, lack of content, and unfinished features led to widespread dissatisfaction. When the sequel launched, it couldn't win back the trust of those fans who had already felt burned by the first title. Once trust is broken in a gaming community, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. Even the improvements made in the sequel couldn't restore faith in the franchise, as many fans had already moved on to other titles. A third game would likely face a much smaller audience, with the franchise's reputation working against it. Paid promotions and misleading reviews. One of the most damaging aspects of the franchise's downfall was the role of paid promotions and misleading reviews. Many influencers and content creators were paid to promote the game before its release, hyping it up as the next big thing in platform fighters. When the game launched, it became apparent that these promotions had been misleading, leading to anger and betrayal from the fanbase. This only deepened the sense of distrust within the community. As the second game was released, the damage from the first game's misleading marketing was still fresh in the minds of many. The public had seen through the promotional hype, and no amount of promises or updates could undo the damage caused by the overinflated expectations. The death of the dream. No hope for a third game. At this point, the dream of a third Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl game is effectively dead. Between the fractured fanbase, the departure of key developers, and the franchise's financial failure, there's little reason to believe that a third installment would succeed. The series simply never gained the traction needed to become a lasting competitor to Super Smash Bros., and without significant changes in direction, it's hard to see how a third game could break the cycle of disappointment. For fans, it's time to let go of the hope that Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 3 will ever come to fruition. While the idea of a Nickelodeon-themed platform fighter was once tantalizing, the series has proven to be more of a cautionary tale about the dangers of overhyped, underdelivered games. There are other franchises to support, and it's time to move on from the dream of a Nickelodeon platform fighter that could rival the classics.